Well, we just witnessed the greatest one-day stock market loss in world history. More stock market wealth was lost on Friday than any other day in world history. Global investors lost a total of $2 trillion on the day following that Brexit vote. And where it sits right now, this is on top of the trillions that investors were losing already the past 12 months of the year. And it's important to understand here that this isn't the beginning of a crisis. There was already a crisis underway. This has simply accelerated the issue. And as I've stated before, when looking at Britain, you have got to remember who sits at the heart of all of this. Of all countries to be able to pull away from the EU and be able to pull this off, what sits at the heart of all that? It is London. It is the crown. And if you do not know who is running the game, you've got some homework to do. There is a reason why it was stated once in the mainstream media, never ever repeated it, where their governor of finance came out and stated, oh, well, we have $220 billion set aside just for this. It's only going to cost us $180 billion. They're going to have many billions set aside that they're not going to talk about while people freak out. And what's interesting to note here on top of all this is certain individuals made off like bandits. Big time. Guess who made out bigger than almost anybody out of this whole thing? George Soros. George Soros, and the numbers aren't out officially, but he bet against the pound, and he did this in the past. He made bukus of money in the past doing this, and got a nickname for being the man that broke the Bank of England. Now, just to put this into perspective, there are individuals here across the globe that have lost wealth here. The world's 400 richest people have just lost $127.4 billion. Billionaires altogether lost 3.2% of their total net worth, bringing that all together to $3.9 trillion. Now, the biggest decline belonged to Europe's richest person, which is Amancio Ortega, who lost more than $6 billion in one day, while 9 others dropped more than $1 billion, including Bill Gates and the wealthiest person in the UK on paper. They can't state that and have this man's name there without mentioning the crown, which the crown will not be mentioned because the hoards of gold that they have in their vaults, everything that is uncounted, it goes on and on and on. So you look and you see a lot of these individuals that we've seen connected to bad things across the globe, these billionaires that care not, that with $1 billion of all that money, they could have changed a lot of things, helped a lot of people. But how is it that George Soros makes off with a ton of money? See, he warned of a Black Friday, of all the stuff happening. The crash and the decline and all this. He knew it was coming. He made money off of it last time. He made money off of it this time. So how is it that the rest of these individuals didn't know? Or did they know? And they took this on the chin because this is all part of the plan. That's what I believe this to be. There's no way, to me, that these world power leaders here, these billionaires, did not see this coming. It just goes to show you who's really in control and has power here when you see who officially made off with all the money. So as the billionaires and everyone else's 401ks have been hit, people are going to be waking up today realizing just exactly how much they've lost in this. George Soros just made out like a bandit. And it's not just going to be the British that suffer here, the British people. There's more to this than meets the eye. You have European banking stocks having their worst day ever. In particular, DB Bank fell an astounding 18%, an all-time record. Now, why is that concerning? Because DB Bank is the same bank that just got busted here the past couple months, rigging the gold markets. Rigging the precious metals, rigging them. It should be talked about everywhere by every outlet, everywhere, because it affects everything. Yet nothing is being said. I said before any of these individuals, and DB Bank has been brought into court, and they've said we're basically going to snitch on these other banks, these other big money men out here. Before any of them ever see a day in court, I believe this whole thing will collapse. And that's the only time and the only thing that will usher that in, is these men that have made all these billions while everyone else has been poor. These men knew the whole thing was rigged the whole time. That's why they have all the money they've got. So what's going to happen from here? You're going to hear talk of different countries wanting to leave and do this and that. They're going to keep on using their scare tactics. I'm sure the stock markets are going to look weak. One thing's for sure, though. It's an illusion. When they're rigging the most precious metals in every other aspect of the game, and then they want to slide that under the rug real quick and everybody just ignore that. Back to the illusion. This whole thing is set up. Set up so much so that you wonder how people like George Soros become billionaires, because they're at the top of this pyramid in knowing exactly what's going to happen. They're at these big meetings globally, beyond Bilderberg, that don't even have a name, that you will never hear of, where they talk about what's really going to go down. So Britain, London in particular, the people in the UK, it seems they're going to try to make you pay for doing this. Here on the world stage, it seems they're going to try to make an example out of you. The British pound falls to a 30-year low against the US dollar. And Merkel states that we must act to prevent countries from fleeing the EU. I swear that's the secret daughter of Hitler. And as you'll see over here, they go on to state that Britain, in this scenario, the British people, you are their target. They're going to look to make you pay to try to scare these other countries from trying to make that move. Because they didn't want to have the invasion, this immigrant invasion coming into their country. Now they're going to pour it on. And it's the same people behind these events that you've seen in France. And remember, they had the stadium thing that happened in Germany, and then they pulled it all back, tried to act like none of it ever happened. These staged events, they're going to keep pushing them. So, for what it's worth, The pound sterling falling sharply, continuing. As you can see here, in the Monday morning openings, lots of banks beginning to move operations out of Britain. The big U.S. banks, J.P. Morgan Chase, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, Citigroup, Morgan Stanley, have tens of thousands of people working there. But now they are preparing to shift some of their work to other cities such as Dublin, Paris, and Frankfurt. Just so people have an idea of what's going on here. So all this stuff starts to leave the UK and everything. Who ultimately is going to suffer here? It's going to be the people. Do you think the Queen, anyone in those palaces are going to be... There's no talk, there's no mention of them right now. How much did they lose in all this? Not a mention. Not a mention. European stocks could fall by another 30%. HSBC. Barclays, RBS, suspended from trading. And they did this because they basically have an automatic halt. It's like a circuit breaker, they call it, on the London Stock Exchange. It led to a 5-minute halt so they could analyze their next move. Shareholders have lost £10 billion from Barclays. Lloyd's Bank also fell 8.9%. So, some people state, well, this looks like the whole New World Order is falling apart. I want to remind you that this New World Order wants to ultimately be set up on a one world currency. What better way, what better time to introduce that one world currency at a time to where all countries come falling down. And they all fall down. Like dominoes. And they all fall down. As far as staged events on bridges, other things, anything on the people, anything to affect the people to try to make it look like it's people rising up doing bad things, labeling domestic terrorist, shifting into that gear. This is where this is going to go. They want to bring the chaos that you see in France and Belgium and everywhere else into the streets of the UK, into London. But will you see it against that palace or any other palaces? So as they make these moves, remember this. They can never get the world currency into play until they all come crashing down. You don't think that this is a well thought out, strategic, well planned play here in motion? It is. And if there's anyone that could have financially afforded to break away, it's that crown. And you better realize it. The game is rigged. And where does Rothschild sit? How many places with the name Rothschild sit right there in London, in the city of London? And do you even know what London is? The city of London. London is just like Washington, D.C., and just like the Vatican. They fly their own flag. It is called the Empire of the City. It is the truth. They have their own mail service, their own guards, their own police, their own laws. They are their own entity inside this corporation, like DC is here in this corporation called the United States. The empire has 3 stars on its flag, consisting of the spiritual hub of the Vatican, the military hub of DC, and the financial hub in London. All 3 work hand in hand behind the scenes, and it's time you get to know it. This is why we say Illuminati, to pull down that veil so everyone can see the wizard behind the curtain. So you can see what's really going on. So as these dominoes start to fall, and China steps into play, and they talk World War III and this and that, you remember, they always run both sides of every war. It's a play on the minds of the people. And they all must come crashing down, every one of them here, before a new world currency can be implemented. Just remember that. New world currency isn't going to pick up and start in one little spot while all these other countries, because these other countries are going to be fighting. China will want to establish their currency. Russia will want to establish their currency. All of them will want to fight to get their currency as being the top dog, especially if the dollar falls. The thing is this, though. Everything's so interwoven that, as you can see here, just one little piece gets shifted. The UK out of this puzzle, and look what it's done. Sending everything plummeting everywhere. Now, can you imagine if other key players start to do this? I think they had the 5th largest economy in the world. Now, could you imagine if the 4th, 3rd, or 2nd, first, any of those start to make shifts? Literally, that affects everything, just like what just happened with Brexit. And I can't stress enough that we're approaching a time here in the coming months, and you remember this, where normally in a time when interest rates and everything, when everything should be coming down, okay, what we're going to have here is we're going to have a collapse of the positive flow of cash. Cash isn't going to be worth much, period. But what you're going to have is a collapse in commodities as well. What I mean by that is there's going to be a food shortage this fall. No one's wanting to talk about it at the moment. But this fall and into 2017, you're going to see that this downfall is going to be timed to where it's going to be mixed with other downfalls, like with the stock markets altogether, the value of currency. When you have all of those trending downward, it spells disaster. Okay, that is what is coming in the offing. You better be paying attention to these stockpiles. I hope you are. Because they are. And for the longest time, they've been stashing away their seed vaults and everything else. They're prepared. Question is, are you? But that's some key information here to take in pertaining to what's just happened here with seeing the biggest loss ever in one day. And like I said, all these other banks making moves, there's all these threats. But the reality is this, is that they had this planned all along. And it's in my opinion, they're going to start targeting the people of the UK in the streets, in these areas. And they're going to try to make madness. And then the same thing is going to mirror here in the United States. It's already in motion. They're going to try to compound these issues. I'll leave plenty of links. Continue to update. But I can't stress enough here. At the end of the day, they want all of the dominoes to come falling down. It's the only way they're going to get in their whole new world order. It's the only way.